It's curious how smooth everything goes in TMartn's life. TMartn is so filthy rich, he actually bought an inflatable bouncy house for his dog because he has thousands of dollars of extra money to blow every month, all to make a stupid video about it. But I'm wondering how this would work out for the person if the person did this for his dog instead of TMartn. Here's how it would go for the person doing this for his own dog. What if the person's dog was afraid to go into the bouncy castle? I'm thinking the dog probably wouldn't be, but at the same time I'm thinking the person used to have a German Shepherd as a teenager that was afraid of everything. And the person remembers how much he used to abuse the German Shepherd for being so afraid of everything. Abuse out of frustration that it is so afraid of everything. And ironically, the abuse made it even more afraid of everything. And it was an aggravating, vicious cycle. But let's say the dog, the German Shepherd, does go into the bouncy castle. The dog wouldn't know to start jumping on his own. So the person enters the bouncing castle with the dog. The person starts jumping up and down, and that causes the dog to start bouncing around, which unnerves the dog, and it scrambles out of the bouncy castle. Oh no, the person spent a lot of money so the dog can enjoy the bouncy castle, and he better get back in and stop being afraid. The person drags the resisting dog by the leash back into the bouncy castle. As the dog resists, one of his claws punctures a hole in the rubber. Now the person is really pissed because the dog was an asshole by resisting and punctured a pinhole in the bouncy castle. In rage, the person drums the dog with the bottoms of his fists while howling out in a high-pitched voice that is a parody of a hysterical feminine voice. "Why did you do this?" The dog whistles in pain and fear. Then the person puts duct tape over the hole. Then the person puts the dog and himself inside the castle and duct tapes the gates to the bouncy house so the dog can't get out, and now the dog is scared as he is flopping up and down, which is caused by the master bouncing up and down inside the house. The master leaves the dog trapped in the bouncy house, as if inside a cage, and then starts dumping plastic balls inside. The dog behaves scared and confused as he starts wading through hundreds of balls that are 2 feet deep. The person starts splashing the balls all over the dog. The person adds so many balls that the dog ends up sinking below the surface with his head completely. Well, because it's funny to do that, to take it to that extreme. Finally, the dog is in such a hard thrall of panic, it tears its way out of the bouncy castle. All the balls inside the bouncy castle go running away down the driveway, creating a mess. Hundreds of plastic, colored balls. The person is livid with fury at the dog's assholishness. The dog is not being a good sport. The person chases the dog in fury, asking it to come, but it won't come. The dog is afraid it will be beaten if the person catches it, which it will be. A car drives by and has to slow for a second because the dog is out in the street and he doesn't care that he is interfering with traffic and bringing shame to the master. Once the person catches the dog, he drums on it with fists, again for pissing him off, and then berates it, like an infuriated parent berating an unruly child, while sending the dog back to his shit-filled pen, which the person rarely, if ever, cleans up because the person is lazy. That's it. The person is so mad, he has abandoned the desire to get his dog to play in the bouncy castle. Next, the person ends up cleaning up all the balls, an annoying chore that irritates the person, all because the person is scared the neighbors will report him for littering. Oh, how he wishes he could shoot those neighbors dead with an AR-15 if they were to do such a thing. The person then has their 10th fit of rage within the hour and slashes up the bouncy castle, because everything that should have turned out fun has turned out so miserable and shitty instead. So he slashes up the bouncy house because it brought him such a misery. Then the person cries over the wasted money and regrets the impulse of slashing up the bouncy castle with a knife because now it can't be repaired. The person would have to heavily redact much of the footage from the vlog he made about this event before posting it online, so he can avoid being arrested for animal cruelty. Life is so hard for the person. Everything turns to shit. And yet society is hell-bent on catching the person doing something in anger by way of security cameras, so the person can be arrested and their life can be made even worse. The person is already suffering because the dog failed to enjoy the bouncy house, because of the animal's irrational fear, where the dog probably pretended to be afraid just to be an asshole. And yet, on top of all of that, there are people craving to get the person in jail to make his life worse. Yes, the person soothes his guilty conscience for abusing the dog by telling himself that the dog purposely pretended to be afraid, thinking that would justify it acting like an asshole. That yes, the dog indeed possesses the higher intellect to do such a thing. Why couldn't the dog be intelligent, like the dog in the movie Air Bud? That dog in the movie wouldn't be scared. He would automatically know what the purpose of a bouncy castle is, and use it like it's meant to be used. The person watched all these children's movies about smart dogs as a kid, where the dogs had human-like intelligence for no reason, and wished he could have the same experience with his own dog in real life. And because he couldn't make human friends. And the asshole dog fucking ruined it. The person hoped the dog will happily place itself into weird, uncomfortable situations to amuse the master, and life would be so joyful. You see what a comedy the person's life is. How can a person who is like this emotionally achieve a safe existence for themselves, in a sense where they won't be arrested one day? And then, after all this aggravation, all the physical abuse of the dog, all the wasted money, the video gets 20 views, and the person can't even show the funniest parts of the video where he abuses the dog in rage. How can the person accomplish being like TMartn and have things go smoothly for him, like for TMartn? Imagine this was a scene in a movie. How fucking hilarious that movie would be. What if society sends over a muscle head from David Baldacci's book, No Man's Land, to intimidate the person into not being angry? By the way, that's why the Jewish people had to stick together as a tribe, form the Brotherhood of Freemasonry, or they would always end up bullied for their personalities and their proclivities by the Gentiles. That's why the Jewish people have such a strong cohesion and need to control things. Otherwise they'd always be bullied for their personalities and their untoward proclivities by the Gentiles. There are people who would like to send a man like Paul Rogers from the book No Man's Land to intimidate and abuse the person for how he treated the dog because of his mental illness. A man like Paul Rogers is all hard muscle, a super soldier, and is 50 years old and doesn't need to sleep really, unlike the person. And he's the extreme opposite of a metrosexual, and because the person is a metrosexual, he will very much look down on the person. He has been in prison for 10 years, and it alone will upset him that the person has not been in prison yet. And he is prone to kill people with his fists alone, who try to say anything remotely smart or disrespectful to him. And they're gonna have Paul Rogers promise the person that if he hurts the dog again, Paul Rogers will punch him in the throat hard enough to explode his jugular. And now the person will have to live in further terror that if they lose control one more time because life is hard, Paul Rogers will kill them for the temper tantrum. The only way the person can be free of such a bully is to shoot him in the back. But where to get a gun? How to make sure the bully cops can't jail the person for murder afterward? In this video where Colin Flaherty speaks to a prison psychiatrist about black criminality in prison, the prison psychiatrist has said that often black men in prison will lament that they ended up in prison for murder by saying, "How did God let this happen?" And the prison psychiatrist coldly answers, "God didn't let this happen, you let this happen." The person doesn't agree. Those black people can't help their biology that makes it easy for them to be violent and kill someone. The person relates to how the black people are scared that one day they'll be angry enough to punch a white person they think is racist and will be arrested, and they don't want to live like that, but they are forced to live like that by the police.